Well, let's dive further into the college football playoff and Taylor McHargue's viewpoint, former Rice quarterback, college football analyst. You're going to hear him all season long, joining us here each Friday on 365 Sports. And Taylor, thanks so much for your time today, man. What a whirlwind 24 hours for the sport that we all love. But I was just reading your little back and forth with Ari Wasserman about the expanded college football playoff, and just dive into your initial thoughts with us. Is this great for college football? Is this good? Is this bad? How are you viewing this? It appears that you are in favor of the move being made today.
I think it's great for college football, and I struggle to agree with really any point on the other side. The only one that I would agree with, I saw Tom Fornelli put out, hey, I don't understand why the committee would make this decision on a Friday of opening weekend. Could this not have waited until Tuesday? I did agree with that. The timing was a little weird. But just take a step back and look at what the postseason has become in the past few years. Bowl games are irrelevant, and if you're not in the Final Four, even the New Year's Six games have started to lose their luster. People have just stopped caring about the postseason, and that's unfortunate for college football. It's one of the only sports where the regular season had started to trump the postseason in a lot of ways. And even the Final Four, you were getting the same 5 or 6 teams every single year. And what that was creating was the same 5 or 6 teams were gobbling up all of the 4 and 5 stars. And the percentage of blue chip recruits going to the Alabamas and the Georgias were just increasing because those kids are realizing, hey, there's only a handful of schools that realistically have a chance at playing for a national championship. This changes that. And Ari Wasserman's comment, and there's a lot of people that share this thought, that, well, now you've diluted the value of the regular season. Now, if Alabama loses in the regular season, well, they're still going to get into the final, or they're still going to make the playoff. And my counter to that was, well, for the Alabamas and the Ohio States, that was happening anyway. A regular season loss for them really didn't mean much. And Alabama and Ohio State don't lose 2 games in the regular season. So expand this. It's good for the sport to have a seat at the table for more schools outside of the same 5 and 6 teams that you see every single year. And the other argument that I would make is you can't tell me that upsets aren't going to happen in this format because we see them all the time. Go look. Last night they showed this highlight 15 times in the Backyard Brawl about, West Virginia back in, I believe it was 2007, had a chance to go to the national championship, and they lost at home as like a 20-point favorite to Pitt. That's going to happen in an expanded playoff format. You're going to get an 8 seed that goes and upsets one of the top seeds. It will happen. It might not happen every time, but this idea that, well, no, there's no need in expanding it because it's just going to be a bloodletting every time a 1 plays a lower seed. I just don't believe that. So, and the last thing I'll say on this, and I'll get off my soapbox, this is good that we have home venues for playoff games. You're going to have teams are going to get to host playoff games in December. How amazing is that going to be for college football, just from the entertainment standpoint? So I'm in favor of it, basically, in any way you slice it, I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, and Taylor, I think you brought up a really good point. I mean, most of the college football playoff games have been blowouts anyways, and it's been involving the same teams every year, and now you're giving kind of these different schemes and different approaches to the game, opportunities to go up against some of these big brands. I mean, is that kind of something that you are kind of anticipating as well?
There are still going to be a lot of blowouts. You're going to have teams that they're just overmatched, and you're going to get a lower seed that frankly doesn't belong there. Especially, we're talking about the format's going to be the top 6 conference champions and then 6 at-large teams. Well, there's going to be a couple of those conference champions. It happens every year that they upset and win their conference championship, and they're really not that good of a team. They don't belong at in the what we would consider the playoff format right now, and they're probably going to get rolled. But you're also going to have teams that slip up at the beginning of the year, or their quarterback's hurt at the beginning of the year, and then you get them healthy. That they have a couple losses in the first half of the schedule, where right now that team's dead. They're going to go there. At best case, they're getting in a New Year's Six bowl. But you get them healthy, and what happens if they go on a run? And I'm talking about even Big Ten and SEC teams. I don't care what conference they're in. The current format cuts out basically everybody else that's not Ohio State, Alabama, if they lose in the regular season. This opens it up and really does truly give, you could say, for almost every team in the country now, in theory, you've got a chance to get into the playoff now.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet, and there's so much going on. My feed just spit it out, and I can't find it again. But somebody pointed out teams that would have made a playoff in this format: Ole Miss, Baylor, Oak State, Utah, Pitt, Coastal Carolina, Indiana, Iowa State, Memphis, UCF, Miami, Western Michigan, K-State. I mean, it goes on and on. There's like 10 other teams that all would have had they all would have had playoff access. So I'm with you. I think this is good news, and obviously there's a couple of very interesting parts of this, Taylor, of the Notre Dame aspect with that whole conference champions asterisk, that they couldn't technically be a top 4 bye because they can't be a conference champion. And also, what does this do to expansion and the Big Ten's plans, or the Pac-12's, staying afloat or demise, or the Big 12 and what they do? I mean, this just opens up a whole new can of worms, doesn't it?
It does, but what you also have to factor in right now is how much the landscape of college football has changed with NIL, and that it has given schools a chance to be relevant again if their programs will buy in and you put together a collective. And for all intents and purposes, you can pay kids to come play for you. And even if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC, if you can get a fan base to be revitalized, I'm calling the Texas Tech game tomorrow. The collective that they rolled out is as good as almost anybody's in the country right now. And their recruiting class is pretty strong next year. That is the type of thing that you're going to see where Big 12 schools that get left behind, that are not Texas and OU, that go to the SEC, Pac-12 schools that have been left behind, the ACC that's locked into their media agreement for like another 15 years, the rest of the American Athletic Conference that in the current format, you'd say, well, there's no way. I mean, how likely is it you're going to get a Cincinnati who's leaving, right? I mean, are you going to get an American Conference team that sneaks in? That's unlikely. All of those schools now have a renewed sense of, okay, well, we can get back in. It's possible now that we can win our conference championship, be one of those top 6 champions, and now we get a seat at the table.
Taylor, last night, it felt like just the way college football is supposed to be, especially the backyard brawl. I mean, what a game that turned out to be. A huge win for Pitt. You're a quarterback. You're a former quarterback at the college level. You analyzed the game. My head was kind of on a swivel from, Aiden O'Connell to Sean Clifford, and, especially the drive to end the game that everybody's talking about to help get Penn State the win. On the other side, in the backyard brawl, you had the big transfers and Keaton Slovis there with Pitt, and also JT Daniels at West Virginia. I don't know really where you want to start, but just unpack that for me, if you would, as best you can. Just your impressions of some of those storylines we saw last night, especially at the quarterback spots.
Well, first off, I thought both games were just wildly entertaining. I mean, I just enjoyed having both of them on the screen as a starting point. It felt like, especially in the backyard brawl, that it took a little while for those offenses to get some momentum. It was maybe not sloppy offensive football, but it certainly wasn't explosive. And then for Penn State, I mean, the Sean Clifford experience goes on, right? For 3.5 quarters of that game, you're like, I mean, this guy's going to get you beat more often than not in Big Ten play, and then leads one of the best drives I've ever seen out of him to go win the game. And we talk about the terrible clock management. We could talk about that for a long time with Purdue, but I thought the quarterback play really for all 4 of them was fine. I didn't think there was any one of them that really jumped out and looked phenomenal. I thought JT Daniels, it's unfortunate that the interception, the pick 6 killed the game, really had nothing to do with him. I mean, it was a great throw that goes right through the receiver's hands. But just from an entertainment standpoint, loved the energy in both of those games, and feel for West Virginia and for Purdue that, they wake up this morning and both of them are shaking their heads saying, we should have and could have won that game.
So, Taylor, I know you're calling the Texas Tech game on Saturday, and they got a new coach, Joey McGuire, coming in. What are your expectations for Tech, not just in this game, but just kind of going forward and kind of the culture that they've built and the NIL thing that you're talking about? They seem to have a lot of momentum as a program right now.
Man, you hit the nail on the head. I've been here all day, and just walking around campus, interacting with people, there is a renewed sense of optimism in Lubbock, and it is different than when Matt Wells was here. It's very different, and you can feel it. Now, that can change if you're not winning games, and I expect Texas Tech this season with this schedule, I think this may be a challenging year for them, but man, does it feel different than it has been the past couple seasons. There's a lot of optimism here that he's going to be able to, Coach McGuire is going to be able to get them back into the top half of the Big 12, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in a hurry.
Taylor, they have an interesting quarterback situation because we know that Tyler Shuck's going to be the guy, but there's also Donovan Smith. There's Baron Morton. They had this, full-blown quarterback competition. And it still sounds like, multiple guys could play. How do you kind of, navigate that if you're Joey McGuire? It's a brand-new program. There's excitement. There's also a very tough schedule ahead. You've named a guy, but there's other guys that could be of value as well, or that you feel are of value. How do you kind of massage that if you're at Texas Tech coaching staff?
Yeah, the more I've dug into it and sort of read between the lines on some of the conversations we've had with them and leading up to the game, I think it's not nearly as close in terms of competition as they may have led on. I think Shuck is really the guy. And they may come out tomorrow and all three of them play a ton, and I might, egg on my face. I might be completely wrong. But to me, it feels like Shuck is the guy, and he's going to establish that game one, and they're going to go with him the rest of the season. What's interesting for them is Shuck has the NFL skill set. I don't know if he's got to produce in order to really have a chance at the next level, but he's got the skill set to do it. And if he has a big year with Zach Titley, he can get drafted. And I think that if you're the other two guys, if you're Donovan and if you're Baron Morton, that's the expectation is, okay, Shuck's the guy this year. Both of them come back next year and duke it out. And then that guy would have the reins here for another 3 seasons in Lubbock. So Tech, although they have 3 guys, to me, it really does feel like you have Shuck that's going to be your quarterback this season, and then your other 2, they'll duke it out for 23 and beyond.
So, Taylor, there is a couple Big 12 games on tonight, Kansas, Tennessee Tech, and then TCU, Colorado. What are your expectations from those 2 teams going into this game? And I know TCU's a 13.5-point favorite going into Colorado. What do you expect to see from the Horned Frogs and the Jayhawks?
I would expect to see improvement from Kansas. Last season, I get it, 2-10, right? Not a ton to write home about. They did have the big win over Texas. But some of those losses out of the 10 that they had, they're competitive. You saw effort there. And I would expect you see them take another step in the right direction. It's still not going to be a bowl team this year, but they might. I wouldn't be surprised if in Big 12 play they jump up and bite somebody like they did to Texas last year. TCU is really interesting to me because I don't have a great feel for what they're going to look like under Sonny Dykes. The way that they've handled the quarterback situation has surprised me. And like you said, which I completely agree with, I'm surprised that they're a 2-touchdown favorite. I know Colorado is not exactly a superpower out of the Pac-12, but 2 touchdowns on the road when you've got, 3 quarterbacks with an or next to all of them with who you're going to play, that was a lot for me. So I'm going to be paying attention to that one pretty closely. I've got a little work and prep that I'm going to do, the rest of this afternoon. But then when that game comes on, I'm going to watch all of that because I think that's going to be a pretty entertaining game in Boulder.
Based on what you've seen from TCU, are you surprised that they didn't name one of those quarterbacks? And kind of which quarterback did you maybe expect to be named the starter?
I did not have a great feel for this one at all because early on, I thought, go with what you know, but they did not do that. And the longer this has gone on, it feels to me like, okay, nobody here is reaching up and taking control of the situation. Nobody is reaching out and, establishing themselves as the guy. And again, the longer this plays out, it wouldn't surprise me if all 3 of them, if they go on like a rotating series early in the game, or if they go with, one guy that has the hot hand. But I do not have a great pulse. They kept it kind of close to the vest. And your guess is as good as mine. Just as a fan of the game, I'm looking forward to watching them tonight and then getting a better feel for what their quarterback situation is going to look like the rest of the year.
Taylor, one more thing before we let you go here. There's a lot of other topics, of course, we could cover. We could talk about this for hours and hours. So exciting opening week. But if there's something we haven't touched on that you think is worth mentioning, please let me know. But amongst those thoughts of what we haven't talked about so far, where is UTSA and University of Houston clashing tomorrow in terms of your interest levels the rest of this weekend?
Yeah, if you had left it open to me to say what is most interesting to you outside of the big game, that's what I would have said. Nice. Especially with Dana Holgerson's comments about the fake crowd noise and getting UTSA riled up. I love Dana, and to me that's like the perfect Dana comment where he's like, "Well, this is what I'm thinking, so I'm going to say it. I don't care if it gets their fan base riled up." They're going to be ready to go. Jeff Traylor's going to have his guys ready to go. They bring a lot of production back on offense, but they lose a lot of production on defense. if this turns into a track meet, I think U of H will run away with it. They've just got too much firepower with Nathaniel Dell and Clayton Tune. But, man, just from an entertainment standpoint, they're going to have the Alamo Dome rocking. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. And I think U of H wins this game. I think it's like a 4-point line. I think U of H wins. I think it could even be like 2 scores. But on the flip side, to talk out of both sides of my mouth, would not shock me if UTSA upset them week 1.
No, I'm with you. I mean, you got to be leery of the Roadrunners, man. And Jeff Traylor, absolutely. Taylor, great stuff. Can't wait to talk to you again next Friday once we have some more results. Man, just so much fun to have college football back, and now the playoff on top of it. You can check out Taylor at TMcHargue16 on Twitter. Also catch him tomorrow on that Texas Tech Murray State broadcast on ESPN+. And Taylor, thanks so much, man. Have a great weekend. Have a great call.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. There's Taylor McHargue, former Rice quarterback, also ESPN college football analyst. Again, TMcHargue16 on Twitter. And there's his thoughts on the playoff. And Houston, UTSA.